In the sprawling neighborhoods of Caracas in 1962, Nicolás Maduro was born into a world of contradictions. The city hummed with optimism, yet beneath its vibrant streets, the poor bore the weight of inequality. Maduro, the son of a unionist father, was shaped early by ideas of revolution and social justice. From a very young age, he absorbed the notion that the dreams of the marginalized could one day change the destiny of a nation. By the time he was a teenager, Maduro had joined leftist groups committed to armed struggle against capitalism and foreign influence, particularly the United States. He was a rebel by nature, yet organized in action. His early political philosophy, inspired by revolutionary figures like Che Guevara and Castro, in Caracas Metro, where he worked as a young man, driving for an informal union, Maduro's early activism was already taking shape. But his path took a decisive turn when he met Hugo Chávez, a charismatic officer who believed deeply in the vision of Simón Bolívar and the promise of national liberation. In 1992, Chávez led a failed coup attempt and ended up in prison, a place where, fatefully, Maduro visited him. Chávez appointed Maduro as the leader of his movement and gave him a code name, Verde. By the time Chávez was released in 1994, Maduro had become one of his closest and most trusted aides. From prisoner to political protégé, Maduro climbed the ranks alongside Chávez. He became a member of the National Assembly, eventually its president, then Minister of Foreign Affairs, and finally vice president. Yet, Maduro's ascent was never just a story of proximity to power. He absorbed the revolutionary rhetoric of his mentor, but he also developed his own vision, less flexible, more rigid in ideological terms. While Chávez flirted with pragmatic politics, experimenting with a third way that combined elements of socialism with market-friendly policies, Maduro's philosophy was uncompromising, anti-imperialist, aligned with Cuba, antagonistic toward the United States, and determined to enforce his vision of socialism regardless of cost. When Chávez rose to power, Venezuela's fortunes seemed limitless. Oil revenues flooded the nation. Venezuela, sitting on the world's largest reserves, earned close to $1 trillion between 2000 and 2013. The country teetered on the edge of what appeared to be a socialist utopia. Schools, hospitals, and social programs expanded. Poverty rates fell, and the government claimed to empower the marginalized. But the foundations were fragile, built on a single commodity, oil, and on a political system increasingly centralized around a charismatic leader. In 2013, Chávez died. Maduro, barely a substitute figure, was thrust into leadership. His election was narrow, a margin of just 1%, and came at a moment when the global tide was turning against leftist governments in Latin America. Argentina and Brazil were shifting, and Venezuela faced the first tremors of economic collapse. Unlike Chávez, Maduro lacked both charisma and political skill to maneuver through crises. Oil prices plummeted, and with 95% of foreign currency earnings tied to petroleum, the economy spiraled. Maduro faced a choice early in his presidency: pivot, negotiate with the opposition, and stabilize the economy, or double down on his socialist vision, risking mass suffering. He chose the latter. Price controls, currency manipulations, and nationalizations of key industries drove inflation through the roof. Basic goods disappeared from shelves. Hospitals ran out of medicine. Hunger spread. What had been a vibrant socialist experiment transformed into an economic nightmare. Yet, Maduro survived politically. How? By consolidating control over the state apparatus. Student protests were violently suppressed. Opposition leaders were imprisoned or exiled. Even members of the National Assembly who dared dissent faced legal harassment. Maduro's government co-opted institutions long neglected, granting them economic authority in exchange for loyalty. Judges, military generals, and bureaucrats became both enforcers and beneficiaries of corruption. Transparency organizations later documented widespread bribery, illegal business operations, and smuggling networks, all under the watch of a president who had seemingly lost touch with the ideals that had once motivated him. By the mid-2000s, Venezuela's crisis had become unprecedented. Inflation soared to levels almost unimaginable anywhere else in the world. Millions of Venezuelans fled their homeland, creating one of the largest migration crises in the Western Hemisphere. Malnutrition, disease, and violence became everyday realities. And yet, Maduro persisted, portraying himself as a bulwark against imperialist aggression. He positioned the United States as the enemy, framed sanctions as acts of war, and rallied his base with historical references to Bolívar, Guevara, and Chávez. Internationally, Maduro's Venezuela became a symbol of resistance for some, a cautionary tale for others. He attacked U.S. presidents publicly, highlighting a history of foreign interference in Latin America. Domestically, he relied on a mix of populist rhetoric and institutional control, ensuring that no political challenge could threaten his power. Elections, often criticized as fraudulent, served to legitimize a regime increasingly detached from the needs of its citizens. By 2024, Maduro had been elected president 3 times. Venezuela, once a beacon of socialist potential in Latin America, was reduced to a shadow of its former self. The country that had enjoyed economic abundance under Chávez was now experiencing famine, hyperinflation, and political repression. Maduro's decisions, steadfast adherence to ideology, rejection of opposition, and centralization of power, had reshaped an entire nation. The dreams of the poor, which once fueled revolutionary fervor, became a tragic reminder of what happens when vision outpaces governance. And yet, Maduro's story is complex. Is he a tyrant, a victim of circumstance, a stubborn ideologue? History may remember him as a mixture of all three. His survival against overwhelming odds reflects both his cunning and the weaknesses of Venezuelan institutions. But the cost is clear. Millions of lives disrupted, an economy decimated, and a country whose potential was squandered. This is the paradox of Nicolás Maduro, a man who rose from the streets of Caracas to the highest office in the land, whose vision promised liberation and equality, but whose policies ultimately brought widespread suffering. Venezuela today stands as a cautionary tale, a reminder that ideology without adaptability and power without accountability can destroy even the wealthiest nations. And as Venezuela continues to navigate its crises, the world watches, pondering how one man's choices can ripple across a nation and alter the course of history forever. So, what do you think? Could Venezuela have taken a different? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this story insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on more deep dives into the forces shaping our world.